reading is in Deuteronomy chapter 21, Parshat Tetze. Just like to read for you a little of what's said here, and to understand that without the Zohar, we have a great deal of difficulty in understanding what the Torah is trying to teach us here. It speaks here about, again, going out to war. When you go to war against your enemies, and the Lord shall deliver these people unto your hands, and you shall take captives of them. And if you see amongst these captives a beautiful looking woman, and you have a desire for her, then you should take her for a wife. Doesn't even ask whether whether she even agrees to be a wife. I mean, there's no choice here. And it says, and bring her unto you into your household. Shave off her head, and let her nails grow long. This is a literal interpretation. So we're going to cover every area. I hope we'll have enough time. And also take off the garments of her captivity, meaning if she was wearing beautiful garments, says Rashi, you don't want her to be appealing to you. Remove her garments so that she not be enticing to you. And let her sit in your household, and let her moan after her father and her mother, because she's been taken captive, and now she's got to feel this feeling of loneliness without her family, etc. And only then, and she should be this way for at least Yerach Yamim, which means a month. And after, you can bring her unto you, and then you can take her as your wife. And then it goes on to say, seemingly something which is unrelated, that if a man shall have two women, as you know, according to the Torah, one is permitted to have a man is permitted to have more than one wife. A woman is not permitted to have more than one husband, but a man can have many wives. And last week's portion, which I didn't want to get into, but it says there that the king shall take no more than 18 wives. There's a limit on how many wives a king can have. All of these things, But here it says, in case a man took unto himself two women, one that he loved and one that he hated. I'm just reading as it says. I'm not adding no commentaries. In other words, indicating that I guess we also marry women that we despise. And there shall be born children, both of the beloved one and unto the hated one. Unto the hated one there shall be born the firstborn, and when he dies, there must be a distinction for the Bechor, despite the fact that he was born of the hated woman. As we know, the firstborn receives an extra portion in the division of the estate. The firstborn should receive an extra share over and above the other brothers. And there should be no distinction. Now, we're not discussing here the just divisions of an estate, but rather the Torah continually stresses the idea that one is the hateful wife and one is the one that he loves. And then another section related to this idea, and the reason that it's called she becomes hated because, says Rashi again, since he had married her, taken her out of it removed her from being previously in a captive position, and now and since he married her, but he really didn't love her, as if taking her under this premise, she would become the hateful one. This is what this is how the commentators explain the second section that we just read concerning the beloved one and the hateful one. And this hateful one is the son of the hateful one is supposed to receive his proper share. That's the second idea in this section concerning the marriage with a woman who was taken in captivity. And the third aspect concerning the same woman, it says, Kiel ish ben sorer umoreh, and when there shall be to this man a rebellious son, he does not want to listen to his father and mother. And again here Rashi and all the other commentators say that because there was no that ultimately she became hateful to him, therefore he became a rebellious son, and therefore he's no longer listening to his father and mother. And what is his father and mother supposed to do? Both the father and the mother shall bring this son to the elders, and they should say to the elders of the city, this son is a rebellious son. He does not want to listen to our voice, to listen to our advice. He is also, and this is one of the requirements in this discussion of a rebellious son, he is also one that indulges in glutton, he's a drunkard, etc. He is then brought before these elders, and then he is stoned by all the people of the city until he dies. This is just the first few verses. I've read it just merely covering 10 verses. Now, just to add, before we begin the discussion within the Zohar, this never happened. You remember we had discussed last week that the high courts never put anyone to death. The idea of a rebellious son never happened. This should be enough for us to understand. Again, this is the Talmud, which states that this never took place. This supposedly should be sufficient reason to understand that what the Torah is indicating here is some kind of a concealed message that must be deciphered, which it is by the Zohar, but that superficially, if we are to read this section, it is most revolting and incomprehensible. And did the Torah define for us certain laws that never would take place, and never took place? I start with not the Zohar, which is the convention. I don't want to use the word conventional, but there are two Zohar, Zohar and Zohar Chadash. Zohar Chadash is in volume 19. It's other writings that were subsequently found. And from the Zohar, it's clear, giving you just a background and introduction. From the Zohar, it's clear that we're not discussing people who were placed into captivity, because the Zohar elsewhere says, who were the people that went out to battle? This idea of going out to battle. Who were these people? They were the most righteous of all the people that exist in Israel. The army of Israel consisted of righteous people. Righteous people. It says in last week's reading, which we did not have enough time to discuss, that in fact those who are weak-hearted, meaning they haven't got the courage and the strength to kill, should not be accepted into the army. A funny army. I mean, with such a requirement. I mean, who else do you choose to go into battle if not people who have the strength to stand up, can face the idea of battle, can face the idea of murder? If we don't want to call it murder, then we'll say following the principles of freedom, trying to free the world, and therefore we can devastate our enemies. And this is the army of Israel. And the Zohar asks the obvious question: if you're discussing righteous people, if you're discussing people who these were the people who were, on the one hand, had to be very firm, but on the other hand, they were righteous people. Righteous people don't go around taking spoils in the form of women. Although in modern warfare, we know this is what always happens. When a country is overrun by conquerors, the first thing that happens is rape of women. Always has been in history, continues to this very day. That's the fact of life. The facts of life. Those are the spoils, and because these men have been maybe without women for maybe months, or years, or whatever, and therefore it's kind of permitted. Nobody reads about these things in the newspapers because we're more concerned about the overall picture of the purpose of war. And therefore, I read from you the Zohar in the Zohar Chadash, who explains it similar to the original Zohar. And he says, Potach Rabbi Shimon, Zanach Yisrael Tov Oyev Yedefu. This is a section in the prophet Hosea, where he says, when you go out to wage war against your enemy, it doesn't mean waging war against your enemy. That's the first premise. It just simply does not mean that. Of course, another question that I want to raise today, that I just touched on a little at the seminar on Sunday evening, and that was, and I don't believe anyone, or certainly if they hadn't been exposed to Kabbalah, understood it when I said, this is thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill. A precept. I said, but and therefore, one of the Ten Commandments is one of the moral codes. And I said there is no such thing as a moral code of thou shalt not kill. Then what is meant by thou shalt not kill? And I said, if you recall, thou shalt really not be killed. The power of lo tirtzach, that if you do not want to kill in your mind, you do not have that kind of consciousness, then you have the protection against those that might want to kill you. Evil people, and there is evil consciousness that it was created in this world for the purpose of Eitz HaChaim Tov V'Ra, Eitz HaDat Tov V'Ra. In other words, there are two universes. One universe which is good and evil must exist for the purpose of free will. If there was no evil in this world, then there would not be the testing of the individual soul or the individual consciousness if we did not have two kinds of consciousness. One that was part of Satan, which is the normal rational consciousness, our normal rational consciousness, which is Satan, without a doubt, because if according to the Zohar, and I don't want to prove again, I think you've heard it enough times, that our consciousness, the 4%, only by virtue that it is 4%, should lead us to believe that, wait a second, what am I thinking? What am I doing? Since I'm only operating, according to all psychiatrists, the only differences between them is whether it's 4% of my consciousness or 7% of my consciousness. But all of them agree that 90% of my consciousness somehow is asleep, does not participate in any decision that I make. Does not participate in any decision. So where's my consciousness? So what decisions am I rendering each and every single day? How can I be sure as to the way I see the entire picture, this is it, when I'm operating on a 4 or 5 or 6% basis of the totality of the ability of my mind to observe things, see things as they are? And of course, the Zohar is right and the psychiatrists are right, because for more times than none, our decisions usually lead us down the path of chaos and disorder. And then we have to look back and say, well, how did I make the mistake in the first place? How did I make a mistake in the first place? In fact, divorce, as we shall shortly understand, divorce. People get married. Today, as we know, 9 out of every 10 marriages, 9 out of every 10 now, today, wind up in a divorce. So why get married in the first place? But somehow we become more qualified to understand our mate after we get married than before we get married. And therefore, you've heard this before, the best way to kill a romance is to get married, right? It's the best way to do it. So why get married? Why get married? And doesn't even the Torah, for those of you who don't know, in fact, in this week's section of the reading, that when a man renders a divorce to his wife, he performs one of the mitzvot. In other words, it's not merely that according to the Torah, as contrary to the doctrines of Catholicism, that there is no such thing as divorce. The Torah does provide the ability, it does provide the means by which a man can separate from a woman, and a woman can separate from a man, is by divorce. Meaning the Torah, when it was originally presented to the Jews, immediately stated that in case there should be difficulties, there is a possibility of divorce, meaning that the Torah understood that there would be people who would be marrying and not thinking they marry the proper mate, and then would find out otherwise, that he made a mistake, and therefore divorce is proper. So doesn't that indicate immediately that the world was given the remedy for the illness? The illness is a bad marriage, and the remedy is divorce. So already in advance, we're led to believe that there is such a thing as divorce. There is such a thing as choosing the wrong partner, indicated by this week's reading when it says one of them became One of them was the wife he loved, and the other one was the hateful one, Snua. Snua. All right. Says the Zohar, we are not discussing here going out to war, as we understand it. It's a completely coded message. Because as we discussed last week, war, under any circumstances, is murder. Whichever way you want to treat war, for whatever justifications, war is war. War is murder. Just because you have validated the idea of why you now are permitted to kill somebody, that doesn't remove the idea of that murder is murder. How do we know that? We know it from Pinchas, the classical rendering of the validation of murder. Supposedly, if you remember when Bilam could not persuade the Jews to turn away from the path, and so they sent the most beautiful woman of Midian to seduce Moses, because he knew that this is the way the entire nation of Israel could be seduced, and therefore they sent this beautiful woman, and she said, this Midianite said, how would I recognize Moses since I never met him before? And they responded by saying, if you see thousands of people gathered around him, you will know that he must be Moses. But the person she did meet was the chieftain of the tribe of Shimon, who also had in his tribe several hundred thousands of people, and therefore as the chieftain, as the leader of the tribe, people also gathered around him. She thought that he was Moses, seduced him, and they then carried forth in some of these movies you read about the seduction of men by women, but they're actually not real women. They are Satan in disguise. There is such a thing as Satan. There is such a thing. Unfortunately, within all of us, he's even referred to as the Ra, as the evil aspect of the tree of life, a tree of knowledge universe. And so, and then Pinchas, a priest, seeing this act taking place, and then they began to have sex orgies and so on and so forth, and he raised a spear and he killed both the chieftain and this Midianite. Says the Zohar, and it says that Pinchas received, because from this act, the everlasting priesthood. That was his reward. And the Zohar asks the question which some of us may think it reprehensible to even raise the idea that Pinchas, who was subsequently bestowed with the high priesthood, should be questioned as to the possibility that he's a murderer. But the Zohar is not ashamed to raise questions that maybe many of us fear to raise concerning the Torah. He says, the man's a murderer. How could you reward a murderer? The priesthood. So it was in the name of God, and it clearly says that he murdered for only one reason, for the sake of God. He had no other consciousness but to put an end to what subsequently became a plague, and 24,000 people perished. And the Zohar says, but he's a murderer. How could you bestow upon him the priesthood? Indicating that, and the Zohar goes on to say that he did die a clinical death and immediately was restored to life. The idea is that murder, in whatever picture we paint it, remains murder. That is never removed from the fact that it says thou shalt not kill. And we're talking about righteous people. Therefore, the Zohar says these people never murdered. If they had murdered, says the Zohar, and that's what we're talking about, the people of the army of Israel, had they been murderers, they could not be considered righteous people. They could not be considered righteous people. The one who shed blood, took the life of another individual, cannot be considered a righteous person. So what is all this about? Just to indicate that when we say that these people went out to war, not only did they murder supposedly, but they also took into captivity women whom they chose to be their wives, without consideration of whether she's willing to become a Jewess or not, because it says after 1 month, as she's weeping and supposedly she will forget about her mother and father, giving you all the interpretations on this little section we just read, then he can marry her. But the Torah wants to tell us too, at the same time, says Rashi and all the other commentators, why is she considered to be the hateful one? Because he married her under circumstances that were not totally correct. Because he did at first, well, why did he take this woman into his household before he married her? Why? Because she was a beautiful woman. It says Isha, as I mentioned to you before, Eshat Yifat Torah, a beautiful woman. A beautiful woman. And because he was going to marry her for the wrong reasons, say the commentators, all of them, because he was marrying her for the wrong reason, ultimately she would become the snuah. She would become a hateful woman to him. Because that was the wrong reason. But you're talking about righteous people. Therefore, the Zohar goes on to say that we're not discussing the capture of a woman. What are we talking about? We're talking about the evil inclination or the valid or good inclination of each and every single individual. It is not referring to, says the Zohar, about a male who's in the army, who's going out to capture people. Though we're talking about righteous people. What is a righteous person? One who understands things about his own soul. Okay? So now we've got an entirely different picture of what we're talking about. We are discussing the battle between not the sexes, not nations, but the battle of an internal battle that constantly is waged between the two consciousness that exist in every person. The Zohar says there are two consciousnesses. The consciousness which belongs to the world of Eitz Hadat, Tovara, the world that is within us, not out there, but within us, of an evil consciousness, and sometimes turning into the good consciousness, and of course the Etzer Chaim, and the Etzer Chaim. Okay? Al ken tzarich adam lasim alav ala yetzer hara divrei Torah, kedei sheyeh nishba, ki ein tzoreh liyetzer hara chutz midivrei Torah. When it says the Zohar, when you are going out to wage war against your enemy, who's your enemy? Yourself. That's who he's talking about. Not discussing about a case that never took place, as we said before, and righteous people. But this is what's called a righteous person. He's making every effort, because it's the only way to live, and not we have to live in a world of, unfortunately, chaotic consciousness. Never can any good come of it. Never. Meaning, only good cannot come unless we subdue, says the Torah, says the Zohar, we subdue this Yetzer Hara, we subdue this evil consciousness. Evil consciousness. What do we mean by an evil consciousness? You mean the idea of killing and so on and so forth? That's not merely evil consciousness. But we're talking about a consciousness. We're talking about a consciousness that leads us to making wrong decisions. That's called evil consciousness. Because what's evil? What is evil? Evil is to the one who interprets evil. Evil means not the idea of someone who wants or something that wants to lead you or harms you, but leads you astray. Then, once we're led astray, once we've been given the wrong information, once we've been given the wrong advice, once we give ourselves the wrong advice, don't have to worry about it. The Satan doesn't have to worry about the consequences. Once you make a wrong decision in your business, he knows what's going to happen. Once you make a wrong decision in choosing your wife, he knows what's going to happen. Obviously, as long as he can lead us into the consciousness of Esadat, where we no longer make use of 100% of our consciousness, the result will be obvious. This is what the Torah is talking about. Children cannot be children without giving the pains of having children. Business cannot be or cannot follow, the results of business cannot follow in the way we would like it to follow, because once we have brought evil consciousness into our system, into our minds, the cassette has been already placed, and we have no choice in the matter. Then things of this nature will follow automatically. So we're discussing here about people who at least have made an effort. That doesn't mean because you're righteous that you can succeed. But this is what the Torah is indicating. You want to avoid these pitfalls. You want to avoid a hateful wife. You want to avoid the problems of having children that you must suffer with. And that suffering comes in many forms. Some of these children can come in the form of wicked children, evil children, rebellious children, and there are many of those around today, rebellious children, who do not listen to the advice, not only of the people around them, but of their own mother and father. Then the results are what we see today. To avoid all this, how do you avoid all this? When it says, thou shalt not kill, we said, who shall not be killed? Not that thou shalt not kill. Again, that would, says the Zohar, be putting it into the category of the Ten Commandments, meaning, we received a religion, received some rules that make us now into a nation of religion. And that, says the Zohar, was never the intent in the first place. What it means, you want to avoid being killed. You want to avoid being killed by the 4 different types of deaths that we discussed last week. You must have a consciousness of not doing evil unto others. Your consciousness must be clean. If your consciousness is not clean, then the inevitable happens. So why go through the exercise? But you see the power of Satan. See the power of Satan. We make one mistake in business, and there is never, unless the individual finally realizes that the fact that he just realizes it and stays with that realization that my consciousness, the consciousness that I'm aware of, the rational consciousness, if that is not overtaken, if that is not even
even to the extent being removed, then there must be failure. And we recognize failure as part of our lives. It happens so often. In whatever state of life it appears, we take it for granted that this is the way things are because we look all around us and we see, isn't this the trademark of people? Today especially, 9 out of every 10 marriages winds up in a divorce. 9 out of every 10. 9 out of every 10. Or they may stay together, but for the sake of children, so on. But 9 out of every 10 marriages are not one of a healthy nature. Why? How do you avoid that? Says the Zohar, Divrei Torah. Well, we know what does Divrei Torah mean. It means making the effort to cleanse oneself, says the Zohar, of this evil inclination. We have an evil inclination? No. It's already been placed, says the Zohar, within our consciousness. It's been placed there without asking us. Without asking us. It's been placed there because if this idea was not placed within us, that we can see things in a wrongly, see them through the eyes of Satan, meaning to be completely blinded. We say, oh, he's completely blind. What do you mean he's completely blind? He has the eyes, and so we're talking about his consciousness. He doesn't see the entire picture. So he takes part of it, the 4%, 6%, and proceeds with that consciousness. And the Torah is, and this is what it means. This is your enemy. Forget about you. You think the enemies are from without. There are no enemies from without. No enemies. There are muggers. There are thieves out there. There are all kinds of people out there. But remember what we said about Lo Tirtzach, thou shalt not kill. It's not referring to us. There is no such thing as thou shalt not kill. No such thing. No. Like we said, it never happened. So what does it mean? The courts never condemned the man who killed, because there was never a man who killed. Then what does it mean? But we see it today. When we see people killed, it's revolutionary. You might almost think it's a whole new religion. That when it says thou shalt not kill, it is referring to yourself. That if you don't want to be killed, this is what you have to do. Then who's the ones who are killing out there? Who's the one who is killing out there?
4%.
That's right. Satan is doing the killing. He's doing the killing. And you cannot tell Satan to become Jewish and therefore do not murder, because we were given the 10 Commandments, which we know is a corruption in the first place. The word 10 Commandments never existed. Never. Never. It's 10 utterances. If you know Hebrew, it's Aseret HaDibrot. Utterances. And therefore, you know already by now that it means 10 vessels, 10 consciousness by which the light becomes revealed. And when the light is revealed, is Bila Hamavet Lanetzach, we have no reason to die. No reason to die. Why do we die? Says the Zohar, because of the one aspect of the sin of Adam, when he ate of the tree of knowledge. One aspect cannot disappear until the collective consciousness of evil disappears. Notice when all of us remove that consciousness of Satan, when all that is removed, then the whole is removed, that last aspect. But anyway, according to the Zohar, this is what we mean about going out to wage war on your enemy. The enemy, says the Zohar, is yourself. Amar Rabbi Shimon, Oy al zeh, o al zeh, tachet evet ki yimloch, vo ki yish balechem, ki hayeser atov nizba biyado shel hayeser hara, v'hu melech alav. Woe unto us, or unto those who are governed, who are ruled by that little fella called the Yetzer Hara, Satan consciousness. Woe unto him. Eshet Yifat Torah, it says a beautiful woman. You want to capture a beautiful woman, right? You've taken her into captivity, and she's a beautiful woman. Who is the beautiful woman? I'm not talking about a beautiful woman. If this is your consciousness, if this is what the Torah meant, and we might ask, why does the Torah say, Eshet Yifat Torah, beautiful? On the contrary, superficially is dealing with Satan. Just the opposite. When you treat it, it says Eshet Yifat Torah. If you're talking about a beautiful woman, and that would be the reason, know that you'll always have children that will always provide you with enough worry and problems. And always ask, why do people want children? Always ask that question. Why do people want children? Most children are only what? A bunch of headaches. And yet people still want children. They can go through their entire lives having problems, but they want children. Why do they want children? Indicating that somehow we have children, maybe we don't even think about it. We're having children because it's the way things are done. Oh, what do you mean the way things are done? But look what's the result of the way things are done. Says the Zohar, the beautiful woman that we're talking about here, Zuhi Aneshama. We're talking about one's own soul. The soul in all of us is beautiful. It's beautiful. Beautiful. So then the Zohar says, so what does it mean? And now he's going on into interpreting all of these different verses. What does it mean? I mean, you're talking about your soul. The Torah says, and this, therefore, it's interpreted as meaning a woman who is a beautiful woman. You take her to be your wife. Bring her into your home. What does it mean, bringing your soul into your home? Your soul is there already. What does it mean, bringing the soul into your home? If it's no longer the interpretation of a woman that we've captured and taken her in, then what does it refer to? Ainu habayit shegosher misham. If you recall, we mentioned the idea of divorce. Divorce. Divorce, says the Zohar, when it's mentioned in the Torah, is not, again, discussing the superficial action of divorce. When a divorce takes place, with the Zohar's interpretation, it begins to shed a little more light on the developments that take place in most of our lives. Those who have undergone a divorce. Rarely is a divorce so simple. I mean, if it becomes involved. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're unlucky. What does a divorce mean? Why is a divorce taking place? We said before, you want to kill a romance, get married. What's happening? Why does that happen? It's a beautiful expression. It's defining what we observe around us, but why? Why? Says the Zohar, that we have been driven out. The word for gerushin, divorce, also means gerush, to thrust out, to be thrust aside. Says the Zohar, when a person is involved in divorce, something else is happening really internally. Something's happening internally. What's happening internally? In this conflict, he is being thrust out from the place of where his soul is. And when your soul is in control, We're talking about your soul. We're not talking about the 4% consciousness, which also is part of your system, known as Satan. Satan is part of our system. Whether we care to address our consciousness or whether we care to address that part that misleads us, to give it another name. In fact, there's no name. Nobody refers to the 4% consciousness, not psychiatrists, as something which is evil in you. No, it's part of Sahara. Nikhnasa al habayit. Shehi haneshama goreshet. Shaneshama shalanu goreshet misham. She, the Satan, drives out the soul, our soul, from our midst. Drives out the soul. This is a process that is going on within us. Now the battle is, should I do the right thing or do the wrong thing? How many times have we even a consciousness of that we may be doing the wrong thing, but we still go ahead and do it? Why? Because there is the Yetzer Hara, Satan, which is within all of us and present all the time. The only question is of whether we are in control. Who's in control? We are in control. Who's the we? Whether our soul is in control of our situation or whether the Satan aspect of ourselves are in control. And therefore, when it says, it means bring him back into your household, meaning into this physical body, which is the house of the soul. Without a body, the soul cannot express itself. Therefore, the house, says the Zohar, is the physical body. And it says, shave off our head, number which we read, and let her nails grow long. Says Rashi, right on the spot, as other commentators, just to indicate to you that this is such a dramatic, it's revolutionary departure from the way we should begin reading the Torah. This document is really for our protection. It's not a compendium of just laws. It's teaching us an aspect of maybe sometimes we're not aware of. When it says, and all commentators say, why should you shave off her head? Why should you let her nails grow long, become ugly, say the commentators. So maybe if she becomes ugly, then you'll look at her and say, well, do I still want this woman? Because now she's no longer the beautiful woman that she was when you captured her. It says the Zohar, it has nothing to do with that. When it says, Vigilcha et Rosha, it says, Titaheh me'ota hasuhuma, shehito ba hanachash beneshama. Remove the head. What does it mean, remove the head? Remove the aspect of Satan, which has taken hold, which has thrust us with all of the garbage that unfortunately we carry with us. And in fact, when it says, let the nails grow long, as you know, we do the Bore Miore Haesh. Why? To remind us about where we once were. The consciousness of the nails, which was Ze'er Ampin, which was Eitz HaChaim. Have that consciousness is what it's talking about. It's not talking about letting the nails grow long. It's not what it says, is what the Zohar is saying. And then it says, Ve'hisira et simlat shivya. Then remove the clothing of her captivity. Ainu says, the Zohar levushe hatumah, ba'minim harayim, shahayu la mecheta ego. Where's this power of Satan come from? It still follows down from Mount Sinai. along with when Moses broke the tablets because of the creation of the golden calf. Says the Zohar, "Shavdu at the egel husr mehem levushi yakar." At one time, we had edyoy. Nobody knows really what it means except the Zohar says we had ornaments. What does it mean we had ornaments? We had the five final letters. 5 final letters. You know, there are 22 letters, then there are 5 final letters. Those 5 final letters contain, but you can concentrate on them, you can do a meditation on them, but it's not sufficient. They appear, these 5 final letters, which I won't go into at this point, but these 5 final letters were removed from the Jew and mankind at the time of the creation of the golden calf. These 5 letters was the crown. What do you mean it was the crown? He's referring to the Gilchet Roshah. Reveal these crowns is what he's talking about. These 5 crowns had total control over the Satan consciousness. When they had that, therefore it was Bila Hamavet Lanetzach. Therefore death could no longer strike the Jews. As long as they had the form of these crowns. And that's what it means when Mashiach comes. That we will have the benefit of these 5 letters, the 5 final letters. At least you have a little information now. That the 5 final letters were not just another addition to the alphabet, but these five final letters. You know, Manspach is a final Mem, a final Nun, a final Tzadik, and a final Pei, and a final Kaf. In the Hebrew language, there are 5 final letters. Nobody even questions it, like myself. Never question. I mean, what do we need? What would happen? Would anyone object if there was a regular letter at the end of the word? Melech, king, is Mem, Lamed, Kaf, final Kaf. Why? Because the Kaf is at the end of a word, and when the Kaf is at the end of a word, you have a final Kaf. What would happen if it was the regular, normal Kaf of the 22 letters? Would anyone object? So what's this final Kaf about? Final Kaf is 1. And now that you know it, yes, we should meditate on that aspect. But then we would have to pray all day. And that's one of the reasons, I guess, why we don't know all the meditations, because we would literally be busy all day. Of course, the only problem with that would be that we wouldn't have to go to work because all the money would come into the house. Of course, then we wouldn't have to go look for a beautiful woman. She would come into the house. Of course, this would be the liability of praying all day. So for those of you who think it's so terrible, no, it's not too bad. But anyway, we had these 5 final letters. And these final letters, says the Zohar, the energy of these 5 final letters, is the energy that can remove from us the rule of Satan consciousness. Therefore, he says it stems from the Egel Hazav. I mean, it doesn't say so in the Zohar, but I'm now referring to another Zohar. I mean, what does it have to do with the people who worship the golden calf? We didn't, even if we are incarnations, but we're not supposedly worshiping golden calves. No, we are the same kind of people. Because worshiping means what? I mean, that's the expression. I don't like it. They were going to worship a golden calf. No. What they did was materialize Satan consciousness. They materialized Satan consciousness. And because they once materialized Satan consciousness, because it was Bila Hamavet Lanetzach, what is death? Death only means that Satan consciousness still is present. Bila Hamavet Lanetzach, when death no longer is buried eternally, it means death is only him. Death is not something that happens, as we said, someone is stoned, etc. No. When we discussed even death by stoning, someone drowns, someone chokes on a piece of meat, or someone is mugged and stabbed to death, chas v'shalom, or someone is in a building that there was a fire and he died or she died, chas v'shalom, death by fire, etc. These are only forces which are manifested by Satan, depending on where he brought us. And therefore, when it says, bring in this beautiful woman, if that's all we can see in this woman, and then even validate the beauty of the woman, etc., and so on, and not see through into the soul, and how many of us can truthfully say we see through the soul? We see through. We don't see through anything, unless we can say we have no problems. When you come to that conclusion, that I have no problems, and even the problems that seem to originate from day to day are not problems. It's part of a process to lead me into more of a quantum. Therefore, if I lost a business deal, which I thought would make the world of difference to this business, and it didn't materialize, the one who is operating purely on soul consciousness knows that this individual was removed, or that sale was removed from this business, because if he was involved with this, he couldn't open up the opportunities for things that were far better. And he would become so involved, and he could not see the next opportunity that was coming. So there is no evil along the path of this individual. Our consciousness doesn't even permit us to think like that. Satan has us so wrapped up that as long as we can remove most of the real serious problems we have, there should be no problems. Should be no problems. Well, but that's not the trademark of humanity. That's the trademark of humanity. How can you create stability? I want you to know that today, and only today, and not 50 years ago, did we have the opportunity to create stability not only in the whole world, as I have witnessed, creating stability on a quantum level, even in Serbia today. The movement is that the Zohar will create stability there. What does Serbia have to do with the Zohar? What does Serbia have to do with? I'm telling you, not a dream. It's already in motion. It's connected with the center. Serbia is connected with the center. Serbia. I mean, that place. Yeah, because if you don't read the messages, then you're blind. And we are blind. We are blind. Serbia began World War I, and now it's going to begin World War III, and it's doing a good job. One of the people at the center I was in Europe 2 weeks ago, and I saw the cleansing that's taking place in every country, and it's already taking place here, but nobody notices it. It's already taking place here. You know, the ethnic cleansing, etc., and so on. Because we're talking here. It says cleansing, and the Zohar says not cleansing, ethnic cleansing, not ethnic cleansing. We'll see how the Zohar even relates to it so beautifully. Without the Zohar, forget it. Everything that we discussed here is referring to cleansing. What cleansing? When there's internal cleansing, you can capture the whole world and cleanse the whole world, even in Serbia. And I recognize. And therefore, I just put out the consciousness. The Zohar's got to do something, and someone walks in. You see? Someone walks in. Some Jew walks in for the first time on Sunday here, right here in Los Angeles. And his best friend is the foreign minister of Montenegro, which Montenegro and Serbia is one country. And we're working on a game plan now, how we're going to create stability, because there's no way No way that stability will. You can read all about the truces that are coming, then you're blind. And you're blind. You know why you're blind? Because Satan's consciousness puts it into our minds. It's going to be better. Now tell me, what's better for the last 2,000 years? You mean the few years in between that he lets us alone? Because if he was in control for 2,000 years, who would go along if every day was a day of misery? Would you go along that path? Wouldn't you say, I got to change? If your wife was beating you every day of the week, right? The wife you can't stand, and she's beating you every day of the week, would you still stay there or you'd leave? Of course you'd leave. But she stops for a while, right? And then things become better. And you see, I have a guy like that. I know a friend of mine. A couple of days go by, how things? They're starting to stabilize. Boom, he gets the hit over the head. Terrible. Walks away from the house for a day or two. Well, comes back, things are different. Huh? Now they're on their way to stability. A week later, the same thing happened. And the guy goes on and on with this. And you think he's stupid? I mean, who cares? We're all laughing because we all understand that. It happens to all of us. So Satan gives us that little leeway, you see. If he was constantly on our heads, we'd say, I got to get out of this. Now I just run away. I never return to something that is constantly beating down on me. So you don't have to have too much smart consciousness or soul consciousness to understand that. That's not the way he operates. There's going to be a truce on Saturday. See? In that area, there's going to be a truce on Saturday. It's already been designated, a truce. Why? Because two guys got together in London and decided the truce is going to come. Where's the consciousness? Is consciousness there for truce? Of course not. You mean in one day, by signing a piece of paper, all the problems have disappeared? It doesn't work that way. And there won't be them. But there's a possibility. There is a possibility. That's when he said Divrei Torah, he did not mean reading superficially the Torah. He meant if you could understand things about your own life, then you create stability. Or not forget it. Now to achieve this kind of stability, and that's what we're going to be reading this Shabbat. We're not coming to read about a man that went into battle to kill. That's why the Zohar says, and the Talmud says, these people were righteous people. Here you have the clue of the way the Zohar operates. You hear in the classes, and Moshe tells you constantly about the Zohar in Parshat Balatu. He says, don't look at the Torah as a compendium of tales and narrations and stories and history. No, it's a coded message. What do you mean by coded message? First of all, why didn't it write? I only caught that last night, I have to tell you. Why didn't it write the message that the Zohar has just given you? Why didn't it write it just like that, instead of confusing us? By the way, no. On the one hand, he's talking about the way Satan consciousness operates. If I don't know how my enemy operates, then how can I attack him? The reason everything, says the Zohar, this of course sounds almost like it's heretic, and I could be accused if some rabbi walked in and would listen just to this one sentence and walk out. He would say this man doesn't believe in the Torah. The written word of the Torah is only what? The written word of Satan. Imagine that. You're asking, why is the Torah written this way? Why doesn't it tell us clearly? You've got a battle. Say on the soul of Yetzer Hara, on Satan consciousness. Write it. Why do I have to put your enemy and then say your enemy means and start the interpretations as is the purpose of the Zohar? Why does he have to go through all this and make things so complicated? On the contrary, the only thing he's talking about is Satan consciousness. When he says, "Thou shalt not kill," where does murder come from? And you want to avoid being killed. Not thou shalt not kill is some moral indiction over here. How to live a wonderful life. Don't kill. If you're born in Israel, you reach the age of 18, and you ask all the rabbis in Israel, is someone, a male who reaches the age of 18 in Israel and is inducted into the army, is he allowed to go out and kill? Of course. Milchemet mitzvah. Of course. To preserve the Holy Land. It's a milchemet mitzvah. And therefore, all the rabbis, including me, I'm not opposed to military service. I'm not opposed to military service. I say only for those who know of no other way to deal with self-protection. That's the way. Is that the way? That soldier can come home from the front after a battle in Lebanon and be killed by an automobile. So what are we talking about? But because this idea of military, and I'm not here to say let's dismantle all like they're doing that they did in London on Serbia. Now they have to bring all their weapons together. See? They did that in Cambodia. When the UN came in, they declared the truce. And all the weapons have are gathered now by the UN. Nobody has weapons left, right? You read that in the newspapers. You all read that? It didn't happen yet. And here it's going to happen. Why is it going to happen here? Do you know how many times these kinds of truces have been enacted? Where lay down your arms. No more arms. Once there's no more arms, what happens? Now we have Etz HaChayim. We have the Gan Eden, right? Now there shall never be a war. There shall never be bloodshed. No one shall ever die in Serbia from now on. Anyone believe that? There won't even be an automobile accident in Serbia? No, they're not talking about that. They're talking about that one won't shoot the other one, like they're doing now. Like they're killing each other now. They're going to create stability. We haven't had stability. World War II brought freedom. Is there a day that the war stopped somewhere? I even saw an article several years ago in Newsweek. The world never is short of 36 conflicts in the world. Every year, there are 36 conflicts. Whether the conflict is in Peru or it's in Chile, the rebels, the insurgents against the government, there are always 36. Can you imagine? And in that article, the man doesn't even ask why 36, why not 35? Of course, what kind of a question is that? There has never ceased to be conflict. Now, why suddenly, this past Saturday, they sat down and now there's going to be a truce? And we all believe it. We all would like to believe. See, we would all like to believe that everything is going to be good. When we make a decision in our business, we like to believe I've made the right decision. I'm going to marry a woman now. I would like to know that I married the right woman. I'd like to know that I married the right man. We're always marrying the right woman. And we're always marrying the right man. Until. Right? Until the first fight. We marry the right one. Right? Then we patch up things. Wonderful. For 2 days. Then we're beat on the head again by Satan. Because, doesn't want to get too good. He still has a job to do to keep us in balance, to make sure we don't get too content, we don't get too fulfilled with our happiness, because then we'll even maybe rationalize that when the wife or the husband is beating the other one down for that day or two, we might even decide finished. No. So it stops, gives us another couple of days of respite, and then he comes back again. This is what what he's trying to tell us. How do you avoid that? Is it avoidable? Must divorce be part of the game plan of humanity? Must it be that way? Must it be that way? He's giving us the answers here. He's not talking about a war. He's talking about a household. Talking about a household. Then we also questioned, it says on the surface, that, so when it says, but he said it's similar to Shivya, remember? Just that when you go back, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And she shall take off the garment of her captivity from her, and she shall remain in your house. See, now that she's been made to suffer with the close of her the close of her captivity, said the Zohar, and it was beautiful. Let her remove it, because the way the commentators explain it, when the conquerors would come in, and the women would put on their best clothes, because if they had ugly clothes, maybe they would be shot like the rest of the people. But like this, they could be, seduce their captors and then remain alive. It's the way they interpret this, what we've just read. So therefore, the first thing you must do, says the verse, remove that clothing. Remove the beautiful clothing. And he says, no. It's not talking about removing beautiful clothing, because that came into interpretation. It only said the clothing of her captivity. In other words, the clothes of Satan. And bring in the other clothes. What are the other clothes? I told you the five final letters that take a person out of captivity. If he meditates and understands, he can avoid the pitfalls of marriage. Now today you learned another way, that if you're involved in marriage, you want to get out of marriage, or you don't want to go into marriage, 5 final letters. 5 final letters is a support system by which it can keep us. That's why the Hebrew letters have final letters, these 5 final letters. Not there just to add another couple of letters for confusion and at the end of the word. No, these 5 final letters are channels by which the epitome of revelation takes place. Where Bila Hamavat Lanetzach. This, says the Zohar, not slew, when it says in Exodus, right after the golden calf. Because even the golden calf, whether it happened or it didn't happen, is not important as to what took place and how we can restore Bila Hamavat Lanetzach. How can we remove the force of Satan from our own household, from my own consciousness? So it says, "Vayinasu kol Yisrael et bnei Yisrael et edim mehar chorev," a verse that no one has a commentary on. It means ornaments. You mean they had beautiful earrings, they had beautiful gold watches. What does it mean? What does it mean, the 5 final letters, says the Zohar? So you've learned something this morning. If nothing else, at least this idea that the 5 final letters, when you observe the 5 final letters, you're tapping the energy of the ultimate, of pure energy consciousness. And the more pure energy consciousness that becomes involved in our consciousness, the less the force of Satan consciousness. That's what it means about clothing. Then it says to weep after her mother and father. A month, and we asked, a month? Says the Zohar, and only the Zohar can say this, and it's very appropriate, and therefore this week's portion is always read in this month, always. It'll never come out in the month before, even if we have a leap year. This will always remain. This will always remain, this weekly portion in this month. Yerech Yamim. What does he mean, Yerech Yamim? A month. Why does it say Yerech Yamim? Let us say 30 days. If he meant to say a month, meaning let him say 30 days. Says the Zohar, and only the Zohar can say this. Hainu Yerech Elul. It means the month of Elul. When it says Yerech Yamim, this I found. I must have known it, or I must have read it once, but it never. I just went through it. You can read, not like traveling down a highway at 90 miles an hour for an hour, and then come to a place and say, "Well, how did I get here?" And you could have been traveling unconsciously for an hour. You're maneuvering a vehicle, maybe even at 90 miles an hour, and you're not even conscious that you're driving the automobile. This has happened to all of us. You want to know who's driving the car? If you were not driving the car, who was driving the car? This is so blatant because this happened to all of us. Who drove the automobile? Who drove the automobile? And we were not conscious of it. Who drove it? But when they brought this was for this specific purpose. In the month of Elul, as we announce every morning, the month of cleansing. This is the epitome of this year, by the way, of cleansing. That's why this month is so important. This month we should make the absolute wrong decisions that probably we'll never recover from. Or this month we should make the right decisions that can go so far. Why? Because every year, every month is the month of cleansing. Who says that? The Zohar. How would I know to relate this to Elul? There's no mention. All it says is Yerech Yamim, and just to see how you interpret, a full month. A full month. That's how we interpret it. A full month, and all of it, and all translators interpret it that way. Well, how else? Says the Zohar. It's not talking about a full month. It's talking about the month of cleansing, because what we have been discussing, we here have been discussing for almost the last hour and a half, is what? Cleansing. How do you avoid the pitfalls? How do you get married and not end the romance? How do you do that? How do you do that? This is what it's talking about. Everything we've heard and listened to what the Zohar was explaining for us is not a question of an army going into battle and having this interpretation. And if this is the way you get married, then why does it say about rebellious children that never happened? You remember? That was one of our questions we raised originally. Why are you talking about a situation that never took place? That means God didn't know that it was never going to take place, that they were never going to stone this child. Even though there are parents, the maximum that they'll do is take this child, this rebellious child, incorrigible, and place him in an institution. But the parent isn't called upon to stone this child. What a cruel way of dealing with. I wonder what the psychologist would say about how to bring up children, stone them. How would they take to it? You think they would agree? So stone the kids. Stone the kid. And the Talmud says it never happened. So God, why did you put it in the first place if you knew it was never going to happen? If you knew that there would never be a court to stone, and that's what it says clearly. There's just no way of interpreting 21. And the men of the city shall stone him with stones that he die. How else can you interpret it? Take this child, rebellious child, stone him. And yet it never happened. I'm not talking about that. Says the Zohar, if you cleanse yourself, do you want to know what the result is? You won't have a rebellious son. But know that when you marry, and this is not the consciousness of both parties involved, you're stupid. There could be no headaches with children? No headaches? It's unheard of. Yeah, maybe once in a while you come across children that were always kind and good and created no aggravation. They were always concerned not to aggravate their parent. They would think in advance that if the parent didn't know where they were for a certain amount of time, they would call. You do have occasionally those children that in advance think of what possibly could upset their parents. Not what they could take from their parents, but to think how they could avoid their parents from any aggravation. That kind of child. Rare. Never come. Zohar's giving us the recipe. Cleanse yourself. Cleanse yourself. Okay, so I'll cleanse myself. What do you want me to do? Go up on a mountain? Go up on a mountain? Become good? What does the psychiatrist say? Listen, this is your problem. You got to change. Weight Watcher tells you, listen, this is your problem. You're eating too much. You got to close your mouth. Look, we have all the solutions. So how come there's still weight programs around? How come there are still psychiatrists around? I mean, if it's so simple. Because the question is, how do I get there? And the Zohar stated it in the first words. Be involved in Divrei Torah. So naturally it means now all of us should pack up, go into some yeshiva, and study all day. Right? I think that's what the Zohar meant. No. He said, if you can only understand what the Torah is trying to teach us, and it's only referring to our consciousness. The battle is not do this, do that. Get involved. Get involved with the talk of consciousness. You're on your way. Get involved in the talk of consciousness. No, and once you come to that conclusion, by the way, you finished your job. I mean, once you come to the conclusion, and you do not deviate from that conclusion, no matter what happens in the future, but that anything that's happening, things that are going wrong, that is Satan consciousness. It can't be. It can't be Eitz HaChaim consciousness. So why is it going wrong? Oh, cleansing. I have some baggage from a prior incarnation. Now Satan is cleaning it out. He's giving me the opportunity. That's the only reason Satan is here. He's either here to mislead me, or he's also here for what? For cleansing. He's making a little difficult situation. Why is he making it difficult? To see how I react. Do I say now, oh, I've got a problem. I've got a serious problem. Well, I say, no, it's not a serious problem. It's a serious opportunity. Same thing. It's an opportunity or a problem. What does it depend on? Your consciousness. Nothing more. Either you inject the word serious opportunity or serious problem. You know how simple that is? Either you say with your mouth, with your consciousness, you speak to your consciousness, you say, this is a serious opportunity. In other words, I have this little problem because I want to pay some debt of a prior incarnation, something maybe I did wrong here. With that, guarantee we will wind up with a woman that we need not have the battles that are part of marriage. Need not be. It's an opportunity. Even when you have a fight with your wife, that's an opportunity. It's cleansing something. Battle doesn't mean you're beating each other. It doesn't have to come through problems that sometimes the verbal is even more devastating than the physical. But if you want to be sure about the right woman, you want to be sure about the right children, this is the recipe. If you want to be sure about the right relationships, this is the recipe. And that's what we have here. What's the antidote? Cleansing. And this is the month. This is the Zohar says, this is the month. This is our opportunity this month to cleanse. And B'ezrat Hashem, we go into a new year that the whole world we know is as I mentioned, nigash, tinagesh, is another paradoxical word. Everyone loves a vacuum cleaner, but not when you're being swept up, right? Everyone loves a vacuum cleaner, sweep clean, but you don't want to be the one who swept clean. The only difference. Or tinagesh, confrontation. But you know what tinagesh also means? Drawing closer. There are going to be those two opposites. It's going to be here again a paradox. But of a more serious nature, because now we have 90, 91, 91, 92, 90, 91 that is staying with us. Ethnic cleansing is going to go on into the next year, until there is cleansing. Not ethnic cleansing, but cleansing. That the whole world begins to recognize that there is another consciousness, and that our consciousness is evil consciousness, essentially. And with that, we draw closer to the light. Once you draw closer to the light, nothing can touch you. Nothing can touch you. Amen.